Evening, everybody. Coming up is another one of our subscribers' weekly previews. You'll know the drill with this by now. This is segments from a show we did earlier today with Paddy Boylan from The Athletic and Warren Doyle. We spoke about all things Everton for just under an hour. And if you want to listen to this in full, the link is in the description. You can join us on patreon.com/The Blue Room Extra. Here is a segment about the protests that have been planned for the game after Southampton at the weekend and the growing pressure that has been on the club's hierarchy in the last few days. And a reminder, if you want to listen to this in full, the link is in the description wherever you listen to this podcast. Hope you enjoy it, and hopefully we'll see you over on the Blue Room Extra too.
The time's come, hasn't it? The time has come. I consider myself personally a bit of a moderate. I've had issues before with certain things Everton have done at the top end of the club, but I never really tended to get too much involved in that because generally what I saw on the pitch was okay. And I think that's been the general thing. And maybe I'm part of the problem, who knows? But I've always generally thought that we do things generally good at Everton. But I think the time has come now where people like myself, who are quite moderate, have just seen this succession of failure over the last few years. And I used the word mobilise earlier on. People are starting to mobilise now because we've had enough. We've simply had enough. And I don't think it's necessarily that you can blame everything on what happens on the football pitch. There's certain things that have gone wrong that we've seen. Decisions have been made, and we've been quite a wild football club in these last few years with the different managerial sackings, and it just doesn't feel like there's been a stability. And I've seen a few tweets, doing the rounds in the past about how, we missed the days when we had the Jags and Yobo and people like that, and Arteta and Cahill, when we had a very settled side. But there was times then when people were complaining because we couldn't break that glass ceiling, and we all wanted that billionaire, and finally we got him, and it turned out not very well to work for us. And yeah, I just, I alluded to earlier the fact that what we are good at is coming together. And I think my plea would be now that we really do need to have unity as a fan base, because I think it's shown last year what the force of positivity it could be. And one thing that we can do is affect things that go on the pitch. And I think that if we do that and we manage to do that on Saturday, I think that will have a massive help for the team. But I think the time has come now, Matt, that we need to get on the boards back. We need to find out what's going wrong. And they can come back at us and say, well, we finally delivered the stadium. Well, what good's a brand new stadium if we're playing in the Championship? And the decisions, I thought Paddy very eloquently described it there brilliantly. We're paying now for mistakes that have happened in the last 5, 6, 7 years, and they are culpable, and they are the reason for that. And if, it's the old cliche, isn't it? If we made the same mistakes in our own jobs, we'd get called upon and we'd be scrutinised for it. And why shouldn't they? And I think the time has finally come where it feels certainly now like the majority are scrutinising it and are turning around and saying, this is not good enough, what's happening. We should not be, no one's got the right to demand where we should and shouldn't be in the league. It's down to what goes on the pitch. I think the difference with Everton at the moment, though, is it's not solely down to managerial frailties or managerial issues. It's down to what's going on upstairs. And it's become the time now where, we've got to challenge it. We simply have to. And it just feels like a swell, is that even a word?
Swell, let's go with swell.
A swell, there we go. A swell of people are now joining into this, and it seems like everyone's getting involved, and I think it needs to happen. I think it simply needs to happen because it's worrying where Everton could be without the fans. We've seen that last season without the fans. It's worrying where Everton could be. So thank God that we've got the backing that we have, and hopefully that turns into a positive, especially on Saturday.
Yeah. Have you felt that, Paddy, that swell from people?
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anything as together and as coherent, probably even as cohesive as this in terms of a fan campaign in my time covering Everton or in my time supporting Everton. As you said before, in the past there have been kind of disparate groups that have gone off and done their own things, and potentially even competing factions when it comes to kind of voicing objections. But I think you look at that letter and the amount of people who signed it, the amount of different groups that signed it, and from different parts of the fan base as well, let's be honest. And I think this is the strongest and most united front the fans have had. Well, as I said, certainly in my time covering Everton, our job journalistically is of course to report on that, to tap into those issues, to discuss why fans feel the way they do, but what's gone wrong at the club. And we try our best to do that. I think from my point of view, the things that we're discussing now have been spoken about for a long time. The stuff over dysfunction, the stuff over muddled decision-making, non-footballing people making footballing decisions, whether it comes to transfers or the manager. These are things we were writing in 2019, 2018, even earlier when it comes to kind of the Koeman and Walsh regime. So I keep going back to the point about this being the place you get to after a long period of time of making those mistakes. And I do see some evidence, at least, of an attempt to correct course from some people at Everton. Kevin Thelwell, for example, it's quite clear he's changed an awful lot within the academy already. He's looked at the structures of the club and he's made appointments and he's created new roles. And I think some of that could well pay off in the long term, but that's a long-term view. Make no mistake about it. That's with the academy. You might not see those changes bear fruit for 10, 20, 30 years, potentially, because it might affect the kind of the under 6 or under 7, like you recruit from Bolton in the next couple of weeks. And then in 10 years' time, they could go on to be an England international. There's kind of a long-term view and a corrective course there, but in this period right here, right now, there's far less wiggle room to move. You can't go out and splash the cash. Even if you choose to bullet Lampard, you don't have amazing options out there in the market unless you try and poach somebody. You're not going to have loads of spending power there either. So it's going to take a while to resolve. The hope now is going to be that they stay up, they find a way, and that they do that. And then from there, lessons are learned again. They can build again in another window, and then they can move on from there. But it's a wing and prayer stuff, isn't it, at times with Everton? And I think that's the thing that's got to change. That's the thing that people have to pay the price, don't they? People have to pay the price. And I think often we've looked at the wrong people, particularly when it comes to certain managers. For example, I don't think Marco Silva is a bad manager. And I think time is showing that Marco Silva's not a bad manager. Carlo Ancelotti is certainly not a bad manager. Ronald Koeman is a bad manager, so we'll leave him to one side. Sam Allardyce, let's not speak about him. But Everton have had some decent pieces in place on a footballing level. Even Marcel Brands, I'm still of the view that Marcel Brands is competent director of football. I go back to the pieces we wrote in 2018, 2019, 2020, whether those guys were allowed to do the job or not, and not the root cause of what we're seeing now.
Yeah, it just feels like this is the medicine, isn't it? This is the medicine we've got to take for all those years of things going wrong. And
it's not Calpol either, is it? You know, Calpol's like a lovely taste in medicine. It's like I can't even
Corvonia.
Corvonia. It's Corvonia. That's what it is. Everton and Corvonia.
Corvonia toffees. But I think, like, for me, and one of the reasons why I think this is sort of come about in such a united fashion is that I mean, people kind of got off the hook a little bit last season, didn't they? Because of the way in which it all ended and the relief. Because I remember this when Benitez was on the brink of getting sacked, and we were having these conversations. And I don't want to put words in your mouths, lads, but I remember by and large we were saying Benitez is absolutely crap, but he's not the worst thing going on at this football club at the moment. There are bigger issues than Everton than Rafael Benitez. And here we are now, a year down the line, saying exactly the same thing, probably about Frank Lampard. You know, is he a really good manager? No. Is he the right manager for Everton? Probably not, if we're being honest. But is he the biggest issue at this football club? Absolutely not. And we sort of left all that and left that anger we had towards the people at the top of the football club at the turnstiles at Goodison, because it got to the point where it's like, well, we need to lift this team ourselves. Otherwise, you know, we're going to have an absolute disaster come the end of the campaign. And then when it all worked and we had that amazing night and everyone celebrated and went berserk out of pure relief, it all kind of just fizzled out, didn't it? You know, we kind of, I think fans sort of forgot about the reasons why we were in that situation and things that we were saying this time last year. And even like at that Arsenal game at the end of the season, where I imagine now, say if we stayed up now with a game to go, I imagine now, because of what's happened since, that last game would be people protesting, and there'll be anger, and there'll be, you know, a real direction and fume towards the people at the top of the football club, because we've been in that situation again. But it was almost like, because of the, you know, it was like we were all, maybe, well, speak for myself, we probably all were drunk, weren't we, in the final few weeks of that campaign, just trying to get through it, and just glad it was over. And we obviously got
to remember, Matt, you and Mose at the Leicester game. I mean, that was one of the best post-match Blue Room podcasts I've ever listened to, because it was just pure elation. And
yeah,
I'll still never forget the comment when you said, in just after the final whistle, you said, Leeds have lost. Have Leeds lost? And Mose just replied going, I don't care. And that just summed it all up, because you were so happy at what you'd just seen in the away end that day. But like you quite rightly said, that has masked what has been going on behind the scenes at Everton. And I think you're quite right. I think if we repeat this season where we stay up with the games to go, for instance, and it gets to that last game, I think there would be more protest rather than celebration.